All right, everyone. Happy afternoon. I hope that you've been having a delightful time so far at the CBE conference. Is it your first time? Anybody here having the experience for the first time? Me too. Me too. So yeah, it feels nice to be here with all of you, especially in person in this season. So my name is Michelle Sanchez, and I spoke yesterday, and in some ways today is going to be a bit of a continuation on some of the themes that I spoke about yesterday. We are talking about Waking Up Womanist, which to me essentially is about centering Galatians 3:28 in our lives and in our ministries. So I'd love to explore that together today. But one of the things that I actually would love to know, I just want to hear from a few of you to understand, why did you come out today? What about this topic was interesting to you? And why did you come? Tell me your name as well and where you're from. Yes?
Texas, and just heard the term a couple weeks ago.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Okay, very good. Welcome. Yes.
My name is Nikki. I'm currently in the DMV area and just recently got into mechanics theology. So I wanted to learn a little bit about womanist.
All right, very good. Listen, I just want to tell you that if you have on any shade of purple right now, you win, okay? We're going to be talking a little bit about purple and its relation to womanism. So congratulations. You too, who just walked in. You were with it. You didn't even know it. Okay, one or two others. Yes?
Because of my interest in womanism as it relates to the Black female, particularly going back to Alice Walker, to the color purple, and so on and so forth.
Very good.
Oh, and my name is Mary Johnson. I'm from Gaithersburg.
Welcome, welcome. One more. Yes, Craig.
I'm Craig Keener, and my second book, actually called Women and Lives, was sort of from a woman's perspective. You know, I said it in the book, but most people didn't notice.
That's why I loved your book so much. Oh my goodness. Okay, that's great. Well, welcome everyone. You know, the theme of our conference is exploring the fullness of Galatians 3:28. And there's this trio set up of race, gender, and class, essentially. And that's why I think that a perfect way to explore the fullness of Galatians 3:28 is by taking a look at womanism. And specifically, I'm going to be coming at it from the standpoint of evangelical womanism, which some people would look at as a kind of a contradiction in terms, but that's okay. We are going to create our own definition. This is the one I am going to be using. Evangelical womanism is a Christ-centered, holistic lens that empowers evangelical disciples of Jesus to remain mindful of race, gender, and class dynamics in all we do in the spirit of Galatians 3:28. And of course, this lens is the lens through which Black women have been looking at the world and engaging with the world for centuries. So yesterday, I spoke about how there's an increasing awareness, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, increasing awareness around the fact that feminism, as traditionally practiced or applied, has not really kept the interests of women of color, and especially Black women, in mind. And so essentially, the feminist movement has been a movement for a select group of women rather than for everyone. And we spoke a little bit about unfortunate incidents like during the 1913 massive major suffragist parade in which all the women were supposed to march together, but on the day of, the Black women were asked to march at the back. So from that point, there was broken trust, and the movement for women really split in different directions. And that continued for decades. But today we're going to pick up the journey some decades later. We're going to fast forward to the 1970s. So much of the feminist scholarship, when we think of feminism, I think a lot of us will think of the 70s, 80s, because that's when a lot of the more recent feminist scholarship came to be, what you might call first wave, second wave feminism. And a lot of the works were by white, middle to upper class women, right? So of course it tended to reflect their interests and their biases. However, from the late 1970s, roughly to the 80s, feminists of color, as well as poor feminists, also began to draw attention to the fact that, okay, we've got to broaden this and we've got to take more women's concerns into account. Why? Because then we'll have a fuller and truer expression of feminism. So, in 1973, the National Black Feminist Organization was launched to press for action on issues that affect Black women in the United States. And this is Angela Davis, one of her most famous quotes, "Woman was the test, but not every woman seemed to qualify." And she produced this work in 1981, Women, Race, and Class. And essentially, this was a study. It was kind of a hallmark work in our time of the history of the women's movement, but from the perspective of the marginalized women among us. It covered all the way, from the history of slavery onward, and revealed how feminism has always been, in many ways, hampered by racism and classism. So in a lot of ways, the conversation, the new conversation, really got started with Angela Davis's work. Here are a few other quotes from others during that time, right around that time that she was working on this. "Every inequality inflicted on American white women is aggravated 1,000-fold among Negro women, who are triply exploited as Negroes, as workers, and as women." This coming from Elizabeth Flynn, a U.S. labor leader. "And as long as women are using class or race power to dominate other women, feminist sisterhood cannot be fully realized." And that's bell hooks. So all of this is fomenting, in women's hearts and in the culture. And then we have the birth of womanism. And the first time that word actually appears is in Alice Walker's 1983 book, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. Okay. Now, essentially, she made the case that Black women didn't really have a place in feminism, and so she created the concept of womanism. And actually, that was coming from a word, womanish, which was used in the community to kind of mean a Black woman who was trying to move beyond her place, sort of, okay? But she took that, word and made it a positive word and said, okay, what we need is womanism, which is feminism that takes into account race and class-based oppression. And then she had this quote, which I love. So she's like, you want to understand womanism? Okay. Womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender. That is lavender, although you can't see it. You can look at my top. So essentially, she said, okay, just as lavender is a weak purple, so feminism is a weakened form of womanism. Okay. And so essentially, all of that feminism should stand for, she was saying, we'll really go for that. We have to kind of create our own space to see that fully realized. But here's the thing. Ultimately, even from this first work, she was making a case that as we affirm the experiences of Black women who have traditionally been most oppressed, we can help everyone flourish, right? We can promote a vision for the whole world that emerges from these experiences. So she had a lot to offer. Still, I love Alice Walker, especially her poetry. At the same time, many, if not most, of the women who began to dream and produce thought leadership around womanism were not writing from a biblical worldview. Not writing from a biblical worldview. So I won't go into all the dimensions of what that means. Needless to say, that reality definitely is reflected in some of their work, such that, if you're someone who identifies as evangelical or something like it, I know that word is loaded today, kind of traditional biblical beliefs, you may not find yourself comfortable within a lot of the womanist literature. So that's why I think, okay, there's so much good about this. It's going in the right direction. Very often in matters of race, unfortunately, the world tends to go faster than the church. So I think that we still have so much that we can learn, but I want to do so from a biblical worldview. Okay, so we're going to shift to a biblical reflection in a moment. But first, I want to just ask the question, why center the experiences of Black women? Why glean from the wisdom of Black women? Why is that? Now, some will say it's because of Black Girl Magic. Are you familiar with this? # Black Girl Magic. It's like a whole movement basically emphasizing how amazing Black women are for a variety of reasons. As much as I love this hashtag, I must admit it is not because we are magical. But it is because of common experiences that we have had that have produced some more wonderful things and some common experiences that others really can and should learn from. When I think of womanism, and why it's valuable, I think of the Beatitudes. Okay, I think of Jesus' words. And in the Beatitudes, essentially what he's doing is he is helping us understand how blessing works. Like, how do we experience more of God? What kinds of experiences, in other words, will tend to lead to more of God? Not because anything is special in and of yourself, but these are the kinds of things that in our world, right now in this life, tend to lead to us looking toward God. Let's remember what it says. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. As I was doing the research for this talk, I came across something very cool. So any of you familiar with the artist Hyatt Moore? He's a Christian artist, does incredible work. Highly recommend you check him out. This is a book that he put together on a recent series of paintings called the Beatitudes. 9 paintings and the process of their making. Intro by Anne Voskamp. And what I love about this series of paintings is that he reminds us of the kinds of people who actually experience these things that Jesus was writing about, right? And so we see women of color, we see children represented. It's a beautiful series, and it exactly captures this dynamic of which I am speaking. So, we constantly want to be seeking to learn from those who have experienced God because of their circumstances, those in whom God has been close to because of the challenges they have faced. There is incredible richness to be gained from this. But you need sort of, the eyes of a disciple to see that and understand that. Of course, I'm sure, the Beatitudes are very famous, but I'm sure when, Jesus first spoke them, people are like, what are you talking about? Right? This is like totally backwards. This is not how we understand blessing, right? Or the good life or any of it, And so it requires a massive shift, which I would say is one reason why we don't tend to seek out the wisdom of Black women or women of color, because it's all backwards, what we value. Okay, so why Black women? Why take a look at their experiences? In part because historically, Black women have been the most oppressed in every way in our society. Okay, why else? I remember the first time I read this book, The Next Christendom. Man, the light is so bright. This subtitle says, The Coming of Global Christianity, and it's by Philip Jenkins. Okay, so this book came out a while back, and he really helps us to see that the center of gravity for Christianity has moved. It's gone south, to the global south is the expression. And that the centers of Christianity are now in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia. The church in the West may be struggling, but it is thriving in other places. So he makes a brilliant case for this and really paints a picture. And I remember I read this book for the first time in seminary, and it just blew me away. This is right in the first couple of pages, and it was transformational for me. He says, what is a typical Christian? What does a typical Christian look like? Visualize it. Typical Christian, right? I mean, just looking at even an issue of Christianity Today or something, I might assume white male, right? So this is what he says. If we want to visualize a typical contemporary Christian, we should think of a woman living in a village in Nigeria or in a Brazilian favela. This blew me away. Never in my life in the church had I thought of myself as typical in any way, shape, or form. I've always been the minority, especially as I've got more and more involved in some white Christian spaces. But really, I look more like the typical Christian than anyone else. This is incredible, right? Absolutely incredible. So, this is a typical Christian. Typical Christian. This is a typical Christian. So why learn from Black women? Well, they're the typical Christian. Funny enough. All right, narrowing in from global to domestic, let's take a look at Black women in the United States. So according to a recent study conducted by the Washington Post and the Kaiser Foundation, this is what they found. This is like one of the largest studies done on the lives of Black women ever. And they found Black women are the most religious segment of the U.S. population, more than any other segment. 9 out of 10 Black women say they turn to God as their spiritual guide in all areas of their lives. According to the same survey, 74% of African American women state living a religious life is the utmost importance to them. That figure is 70% for Black men, 57% for white women, and 43% for white men. Isn't that crazy? Right? I mean, it's so neat. It so neatly matches the power structure of the world. When it comes to grappling with difficult situations, 87% of Black women said faith in God is vital, compared to 79% of Black men, 66% of white women, 51% of white men. Okay, so Why Black women? They are actually the most religious group among us here in the United States. So may have something to offer, no? Okay, this is absolutely fascinating. And I just want to hear from a few of you as to why this may be true. Okay, this fact about Black women. Black women are the least likely group to commit suicide. So I'll give you the name of the study that quotes this, or that shows this in a second. And they interviewed numerous Black women to kind of have a conversation about this, and try to understand more about the psychology. It's in the American Psychological Association. So they're the most likely not to commit suicide. So why? Why?
Because we're not going to kill ourselves.
What'd you say?
We're not going to kill ourselves.
Yeah, but why? Yeah, we're not, but why?
We value life.
Value life.
We value life. And our faith in God.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Langston Hughes probably said it best in his poem, The Black Mother, when he says that we carry in our body the seeds of free. We are the protector of the race, regardless of what, because we haven't had our men there to stand with us. We were plucked. I'm talking about the American Black woman now.
Mm-hmm.
I can't talk about my
This is American study.
We were plucked from our land. We were taken from our mothers. We were the ones that had to keep the race going, regardless of what. And as Sojourner Truth said, all her children were sold away from her. And when she cried out in her mother's grief, none but Jesus heard her. So Jesus was that you had
Yes.
to hold on to.
Yes, Sojourner Truth. I'd say she was the first evangelical womanist. Like, she can get that label from me, yeah.
And so we don't commit suicide because, we got too much to do.
I love it.
We got time for that.
All right, any other thoughts? I love this.
I think they've just gotten used to tenacious perseverance.
That verse, I think it's in 1 Peter, it says, don't be surprised at what's happening to you as if something strange is happening, right? As you're suffering. Like, why are you surprised? So I do think there's an element of that. Like, as a Black woman, I'm like never surprised with hardship. It's just like, yeah, this is kind of how it goes,
We have an inbuilt survival mode.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yes.
Just thinking it's the same, really, with an individual, but it's more corporate because it's known that suffering increases if you don't get closed off and commit suicide or anything. It increases the capacity of your heart, so that then when you know the Lord, this is the group with the highest percentage of faith in God. When you know the Lord, you have a even greater storehouse of compassion and ability to handle, what is rough in life.
Amen.
So I think that's almost passed on in a corporate way.
Amen.
For Black women. Yeah.
Multiple times in my life, especially when I was younger, I would pray to the Lord and say, why did you make me a Black woman? Why? Like, am I in the wrong body? There's so many dreams I have. There's so many things that I want to do. Poem by County Cullen. Why would you make me Black and then bid me sing? Why would you do that? And all of my life, many low points, I've struggled with that question. But it is facts like these that we've been talking about so far that remind me the kingdom of God is upside down. So yes, you will face more challenges, but guess what? I can use those. I can really use those in a way that others may not experience to the same extent. And looking back at my life, I can say, okay, amen. All right. So, yes. So the name of this study is called I've Got My Family and My Faith, Black Women and the Suicide Paradox, American Psychological Association. So essentially, they talk about many different things, but they really hone in on these two huge categories of faith, as we've been really honing in on, of course, and community. So Black women really tend to look at life more holistically and relate relationally. They depend on God. They depend on people. Which sounds kind of familiar. Love God, love people. Yeah. So it's a great study and a big encouragement. So yet again, there's a kind of resilience, right? A kind of inbuilt tendency to not only survive but to thrive. That comes once again not because we're magical, right? It's not. We're not. But I think about the Beatitudes and I just think, well, there's the demonstration of God's upside down kingdom. So let's talk a little bit about how do we allow womanism, the concepts behind womanism, keeping mindful of race, gender, class, learning from the experiences of Black women. What do we do with that? What can we do to enrich our lives and our communities and our ministries? So yesterday I spoke about 3 steps. Not awakening yesterday. It was awareness, growth mindset, and intentionality. But indeed, that first one, you can look at it as awareness or awakening. They kind of go in line with one another. And so we're talking about waking up womanists. And when it comes to womanism, I do think that it is a kind of awakening. And remember, we don't just kind of wake up and we're done. It's like this constant state of growth and going deeper, into awakening, into awareness. And the main thing here, again, to awaken to, the kingdom of God is an upside down kingdom. And increasingly to realize, of course, all voices are valuable. Of course, God is doing incredible things in every person, every people. At the same time, Jesus himself also draws our attention to the experiences of those who have been the most marginalized, who have suffered the most, who have been the most persecuted, and call these sisters and brothers blessed. And so should we. So should we. I think it's also helpful to grow in awareness of both the challenges and the blessings of women of color, especially. I'm so glad you're here because that's a little bit of what we're doing. But I think really to the extent that you learn a little bit more, become more aware of Black women's experiences, women of color's experiences, you will glean so much. Yesterday, I spoke about putting on our Galatians 3:28 lenses, essentially speaking about the need for intersectionality. So that's a common concept these days, which is a good thing. But again, reminding us that we always want to think in terms not just of one category of identity, but multiple and how those interplay. The growth mindset we spoke about yesterday. Here I would say, seek to prioritize the wisdom and the stories of women of color. Prioritize the wisdom and the stories of women of color. And unfortunately, this is kind of challenging to do if you're not in, a community of color already, of course. But, we have heard so little in general from this group. And even someone like myself, I'm a woman of color, but the seminary I went to is predominantly white. And so, it's probably 95% of the things I read were by white people / white males. It's good stuff. But again, I'm deficient myself. And so it can be kind of difficult to seek this out. I recently, when I did this, last night, I was looking to see what are the books that are available in CBE's bookstore, and they have got like many of the ones that I would recommend. They've done a great job at that. So it's not just, women books, but also women of color books about their experiences. And I know that they work hard to like vet the resources and make sure that they are something to enrich our lives well. I'm going to mention just two more recent resources that are seeking to do exactly what we've been talking about, sharing the wisdom of women of color. First one is called Carved in Ebony. And I have it right here, Carved in Ebony, Lessons from the Black Women Who Shape Us by Jasmine Holmes. And this is a story, or a collection, I should say, of Christian Black women over the centuries, what their experiences have been like, how they have led, how they have overcome, and what we can learn from them, okay? I mean, and she talks about in the book how hard it was to write it because she had to like dig for sources and to find information. It was like a treasure hunt, but once she found it, it was transformative. And then Parable of the Brown Girl, The Sacred Lives of Girls of Color. This one, the author works primarily with disadvantaged Black girls. And she just talks about how over the years she has learned so much from them, and then seeks essentially every chapter is kind of like a different lesson, a different thing that she's learned from their experiences, and feels that we can all learn from. The book Carved in Ebony, I have been working through it in preparation for this, and the title is actually coming from Amanda Berry Smith. So she was a preacher, a Methodist preacher, and a missionary. Just to give you one example of a story in this book. And the people that knew her said that she was the image of God carved in ebony. Isn't that cool? I love that. All right, Amanda Berry Smith. Let me just tell you a little bit about her. She was born into... sorry, this is just a lot. She was born into slavery. Her first husband, who she married very young, was cruel and then later deserted her. She lost many of her children in childbirth or infancy. She lived in poverty and squalor as a washerwoman. Her second husband, they made so little that they couldn't afford to live together. Like that's how little they made. And then he died early. I mean, it goes on and on, right? So like the litany of suffering in her life, absolutely extraordinary. But at some point, she met the Lord. She had a profound experience in that. And she began to understand, wow, all of these ways that I have been suffering, like God can use those to make me more like him. And God can use those to propel me into sharing him with the world. So that's what she did. She became a Methodist preacher, and for a time, she often preached to mostly white audiences. Perhaps it's because of where she lived. I don't really know all the history. But often she would be ridiculed by some people in the audience for being who she was. I love this quote. This is an Amanda Berry Smith quote. She said, "I do love white folks, whether they love me or not, and I want them all to be saved." So yeah, Amanda Berry Smith, she prayed that her sufferings would help to sanctify her, to make her more like him. And she ended up, this is miraculous. She had nothing, as I just said, but she ended up becoming an independent missionary and being supported, receiving kind of miraculous support to minister and preach around the world, England, Ireland, Scotland, India, and Africa. And this is what the author writes: "The God who saw her in the midst of these struggles used them to move her toward proclaiming his name throughout the world." So this is just one example, right, of how Black women's experiences have often been used by God in extraordinary ways, that they have not only learned resilience, they have learned to see the hand of God and to understand how God could use even the most challenging situations for his glory. Okay. That is the story of Amanda Berry Smith and so many others like her. Okay, and then intentionality. You want to center women of color in your spheres of influence whenever you have the opportunity. A lot of this, again, it's not because there's something terribly special about centering women of color, but they so often have not been. I mean, it is very, very, very rare that women of color are centered or platformed, invited to the table, all of those things, right? But they should be. And yesterday I spoke about this book, which I recommend. It's not a Christian book, but in Inclusion on Purpose, she makes a great case for why centering women of color in an organization can help everyone to flourish. And then she talks about very specific ideas for what that could look like. So I highly recommend that. So, Black Girl Magic. As we've said, there's nothing magical about Black women. However, blessed are the poor in spirit, basically. I think for Christian women, Black women especially, we can see the power of God at work in their lives. That's the magic. It is the power of God at work in their lives. There is, I have a video for you. I have no idea if it'll play. We'll try. I have no idea if it might be too loud. We'll see. But I saw this. It was made right here in Atlanta, and a bunch of Black women were just asked, "What's Black Girl Magic? Can you explain that?" Okay. And yeah, so it was like too cute for me not to show or try to.
Black Girl Magic is obviously a question. When I think of Black Girl Magic, what comes to mind is us leading and winning in every way. The ability to celebrate the power and weakness and the resilience of Black women. When I think of Black Girl Magic, I think of my grandmother. She was the original Black Girl Magic. We're resilient. We come from a place where we had to learn and grow and fight and just do some amazing work. And I feel like I was born out of that. Black Girl Magic is accepting yourself, loving yourself, and emulating that in everything that you do. Similar to what my dad always said when I was younger, success is measured by the number of people you help on your way up. And so Black Girl Magic is all of these women, and we're helping other people do it. Black Girl Magic is an inspiring movement. Black women are empowering. And the magic of Black women tells you that Black women are going to change the whole universe.
Yeah, I love that. It's the magic of Black women, they're going to change the whole universe. So again, we've been talking about exploring the fullness of Galatians 3:28, and I hope that you have been inspired to see womanism as an opportunity to do just that. All right, so I'm done. And so if you have questions, I can take some. I am not an expert when it comes to a scholar in womanism. But if you have any questions, let's take those. And then I want to also leave a little bit of time for some discussion with your neighbor.